Men, women, non-binary, our trans brothers and sisters, this affects all of us.
The fringe minority made a decision for the majority, and one that we will not accept.
So I'm actually part of Pikeville Pride, which is our local LGBTQ organization, and we organized this event today to be a reproductive rights rally in response to Roe versus Wade being overturned.
We're here because we believe in women's rights and that we should have a choice to be able to do what we want with our own body. I mean, nobody should tell us what to do.
So today was a rally for not just reproductive justice, but for freedom and for humanity. And the people of Kentucky are my family, and this really is a moment of crisis. Our rights, our liberties are under attack. Overturning Roe v. Wade is a devastating blow to our ideas of a free and safe society. And to see my loved ones standing up here in Pikeville, I had to come and just join them in solidarity and tell them I love them, and we're going to win this fight together. The narrative is often said about us that we don't care. Kentucky is often counted out and we're doubted. I've been told that, well, Charles, if you support people having agency over their bodies, people that are going through pregnancy, being able to make decisions over their lives, you won't get support in Kentucky. I've heard people say that. But I know the truth, and you all know the truth. This issue, abortion, but also in a larger conversation, the right to privacy, the right to your agency, the right to your identity, the right to your humanity, this is not partisan. It's bigger than politics.
We could talk for hours about what that word means, abortion. Because we also use the word abortion to apply to a miscarriage. We say it's a spontaneous abortion. So when I say abortions, I'm referring to where you have a pregnancy in the uterus that is being terminated.
I don't know who's going to say that abortion, oh, it's a wonderful thing, but I think it's a choice people have to make once they're in that situation. And it should be safe, it should be legal, and it should be a medical procedure. I mean, where do women go if they're not ready or wanting to have a child? And I know there, on the other side, people are saying, oh, well, there's so many people wanting to adopt. But I worked in foster care in New York City, and not all foster care is great.
I can tell you some horrific stories of things that I went through in my life. I was in foster care multiple times. I have been sexually abused in the very foster care system that these people are advocating for children to be born and sent to.
All of the most vulnerable people of society are going to be the ones that are most affected. Wealthy white women in big cities will either have access locally or the ability to travel for access.
A lot of people will say, hey, look, abortion is very different from contraception. And yeah, there's a strong anti-abortion political movement, but people aren't that as they're not as upset about contraception, so you're not going to have the same kind of drive to overturn Griswold. But it sort of depends on where you draw the line between abortion and contraception, because one of the things that some people say is these contraceptive devices are actually producing abortions, in which case the anti-abortion movement would go after them.
Contraception is not abortion. Contraception is not abortion. Contraception is not abortion. Don't like abortion? Be for contraception. There's no, I mean, to me, it blows my mind that anybody would ever want to take away any contraception option. I'm very passionate about contraception because it does save lives. Birth control saves lives.
Today is an event in support of abortion and abortion rights. And there's an amazing crowd out today. I don't know exactly how many. I'd say easily hundreds of people in the pouring rain to come out here and show their support for abortion access in West Virginia. I'm 41 years old, and for all of my lifetime up until a few weeks ago, abortion was a constitutionally protected right in this country. And I'm a person that practiced constitutional law, and there was a time in my life where, you know, it certainly seemed like abortion rights have always been in danger, but the idea of Roe v. Wade being overturned was just hard to still get my head around.
Our youth, low-income, queer, Black, Brown, and Indigenous members of our community are now going to find it impossible to have a safe abortion here in West Virginia.
It's scary to think that we can live in a country where if I want to live in the state where I was born in West Virginia, that I might have less rights than folks who live several states over from me. And I shouldn't have to move. No one should have to move from where they live to be safer. That where we are should be safe enough for all of us.
When it comes to healthcare decisions, nobody has the right to tell you what you should or should not do. And you know, I've seen firsthand what patients have to go through. I've seen how women who are showing up at the health center to get birth control leave traumatized because, you know, folks are just so staunch in their anti-stance, and you know, it's really heartbreaking.
What Dobbs means now basically is states can do what they want. So under the Roe framework, states really couldn't do very much.
The interesting part about Kentucky's state law, from what I read, is it talks about pregnancy as being in the woman's body. It doesn't specify where in the woman's body. So this is the part that gets really tricky, right? An ectopic pregnancy is a pregnancy in the woman's body, but it's not in the uterus. We know that ectopic pregnancies cannot survive safely. I'm a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know where I stand. And so these things are they're kind of muddy, right? And one of the reasons I believe that is because the law was written by politicians, by lawyers, legislators. Like, they're not written by actual physicians, because a physician would never write a law like that. The way the language, when I read the language on that trigger law, I'm like, this is obviously not someone who understands like basic science and how this works.
Right now, the Kentucky Constitution provides a right to privacy for healthcare decisions. So currently in Kentucky, getting an abortion is protected under the Kentucky Constitution. However, there will be a proposed amendment on the ballot this November in Kentucky that may change that.
Well, I mean, this decision is really the biggest news in generations as far as what it means for our future, for our rights and our liberties. And this was already going to be a big issue for the campaign because a lot of our leadership in Frankfort have made this a central issue. They're not talking about quality health care, making sure that our children get food, or that we address housing crises, or we invest in our local economies, or we help small family farmers, or we address folks that are dealing with black lung and not getting benefits. They've chosen to focus on abortion as a wedge.
Without some real organization on the part of reproductive rights advocates, November's looking pretty scary, I think.
If you accept the methodology that the majority uses in Dobbs, and they say this is how we figure out whether the Constitution protects some right that's not explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, right? We look at history and tradition. If you accept that methodology, all of those cases are wrongly decided, right? Griswold, Lawrence, Obergefell, they're all incorrect.
When this happened, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, there was just chaos, right? And so you can assume that when something else happens, we're going to see the same kind of chaos. And how can you prepare and protect yourself against things that should never happen? But we have read in an opinion from one of the justices on the Supreme Court that he is interested in having happen. It's very scary.
We don't really know how this is going to affect us until it goes into effect. I think that's the scary part, is the unknown, right? We don't know.
It's not something many women talk about. Okay, if women have had the procedure in the past, they're very they're concerned that other people might find out about it and they would be judged.
It was not an option. That I didn't think it was an option if I wanted to like go to heaven and all of that stuff at that time, because that's the culture that I was growing up in. And did I necessarily want one? Not necessarily, but but I didn't know how to handle it.
My experience is that I was 16. Everything was fine. I went in for my 18-week appointment. They sent me downstairs to a different specialist and told me that my daughter was not viable with life. She had a 0% chance of survival. I chose to have an induction of labor, which is like a forced labor, and I wouldn't be able to have that. I would have to deliver her whenever she decided to die in utero. I wouldn't have that choice.
I'm not interested in getting into that conversation with people who are just so closed-minded about it. And as a dear friend of mine said to me, well, everybody's against abortion unless it's for their own daughters.
Roe versus Wade passed when I was 12 years old, so I've grown up with reproductive rights my entire life, and yet now my 23-year-old daughter has been stripped of those rights. And I think that that's disgusting, unfair. She deserves bodily autonomy. And I'm very disturbed that this country is going down the path that they're going.
I'm raising a daughter in West Virginia who has less rights now than her grandmother had, and it's unacceptable.
No matter the reason or the decisions made behind the woman's, it's their fucking business. And regardless of death or life, they shouldn't have to live with something that they don't want, or they can't afford, they can't have, or it could kill them.
When you talk to somebody who's experienced an ectopic pregnancy, who was excited about being pregnant, excited about bringing a child into the world, and then an ectopic pregnancy happens and they're forced to terminate, right? They leave that health center, and then they've got people calling them baby killers and throwing dolls at them and literally traumatizing them. To me, it's some of the most disgusting things I've ever personally witnessed with my own eyes, and I'll do anything I can to fight against that nonsense.
I was 15 and Jade's biological dad was 23. And instead of people going, oh my God, this 23-year-old grown man has impregnated this child, it was, more shame on me, for getting pregnant.
The Kentucky law as it's written, again, would force, if you had a 13-year-old girl who was a victim of rape or incest, who was pregnant, the current trigger law in Kentucky, unless it was literally killing her and you had to save her life, she would have to continue with the pregnancy.
There are going to be lots and lots of adverse outcomes, and women will die. I know for a fact that women will die.
I think the future for abortion rights is grim. I think it's going to be very messy. I think we're going to hear more horrible stories about the impact of abortion restrictions. Maybe people will realize that that's not the world that we want to live in.
So we are organizing in my campaign throughout the summer on issues, and now our plan all along was to address this head on because, of course, there is an amendment on the ballot to essentially cement the ban on reproductive health care, on abortion, on medically necessary treatment. And so we are going to be organizing on these issues from the place of telling our story, not the national talking points or the partisan wedges, but what does it mean to have quality health care? What does it mean to go through the experience of pregnancy and not have the needs that you deserve as a human being? What does it mean to make these hard decisions and not have a government that cares about you?
So the ballot proposal that's on for November, a yes vote supports amending the Kentucky Constitution and a no vote opposes amending the Kentucky Constitution. But the wording within the ballot is written sort of confusing in a way that I think, when you're in the voting booth, if you haven't already looked at the ballot, it will read, you may be confused on what it's saying. So I think it's important everyone vote no on that if they want to protect the access to abortion in Kentucky.
Well, people are pissed off, and rightfully so, and I hope they take that anger to the ballot box in November. One of our main objectives now is making sure that everybody who supports your right to choose is registered to vote. And if you're not registered, change that immediately. Get registered now. If you're already registered, go check the status of your registration to make sure you weren't purged from the rolls. But we need everybody that can vote to be at those polls in November. I'm running for office in the 59th district here in West Virginia, and this is one of the main reasons that I chose to run. West Virginia women and women across this country and all pregnant persons deserve better than what they're getting from these literal fascists who are running our country straight into the ground. So I'm here to challenge that.
It's really easy to lose hope and faith and compassion, but when you see all of these amazing people out that are fighting, I think it's a good reminder that in numbers, people really can accomplish quite a bit.
I have the t-shirts for all of the marches in the past. I mean, if need be, we'll pull them out and start wearing them again. It's too important an issue.
I wake up on a Monday morning and it's time to go to hell. I've been working too hard for too little for too long. They say that these days everybody's doing well. Too bad for me, I must be doing something wrong. I've been just getting by on the sweat of my brow. I wanna get out of here, but I don't know how. I'm breaking my back as I'm digging my ditch. I don't get nothing back, but the man gets rich. And I say, oh, it's just as bad as it was before. I say, oh, you give it all and then they take some.